Everybody is talking about a meeting that took place yesterday in the White House between US President Donald Trump, head of Western-backed terrorist regime in Kiev, Zelensky, and also a number of European leaders, primarily leaders of the so-called coalition of the willing countries. Well, it was interesting to observe developments in Washington. First, U.S. President had a face-to-face meeting with Zelensky. He greeted him, and surprisingly for some, Zelensky this time wore there some sort of a jacket or something. He did look like a clown, anyways, right? But unlike previous arrival of Zelensky in Washington, in White House, when there was a brawl basically between him and Trump, J.D. Vance, who was called by Zelensky a bitch, by the way, at that point. Well, yesterday, this visit of Zelensky went quite smoothly, or relatively smoothly, one might say, although expression on the face of Zelensky was quite telling. If you have seen the videos, by the way, you know what am I talking about. So Trump greeted Zelensky, and during their conversation in Oval Office with the press, Trump on a few occasions highlighted that he continues to stand on relatively new position that he prefers, or the U.S. prefers, to see long-lasting peace achieved, and they're no longer focused on a temporary ceasefire of 30 or whatever days that globalist control regimes in Europe were demanding because of their desperation and desperation of their proxy regime that needed a break, right? Nevertheless, let me give you this report from RIA Novosti that US President assessed a meeting with Zelensky and European leaders. After meeting with Zelensky, Trump had a meeting also with these representatives of the coalition of the willing. Also, there was a head of NATO there, Mark Rutte, and European Commissioner President Ursula von der Leyen. But anyways, let's go through this news. For a starter, US President Donald Trump called their talks with Vladimir Zelensky and European leaders in the White House very fruitful and announced their preparations for a meeting between Russian leader Vladimir Putin and their head of the Kiev regime. I can give you a quote, by the way, from his statement. I had a very productive meeting. During the meeting, we discussed security guarantees for Ukraine that will be provided by various European countries in coordination with the United States of America. And this is an important point, obviously. Globalists were quite focused, or globalist representatives were quite focused on security guarantees. They wanted the US to provide directly security guarantees, and even though statements were made by Trump and their other high-ranking officials that US will be involved in some ways in providing these guarantees, none of them said that US takes on itself this security guarantee. They are focused more on European states to be engaged in this regard, with some assistance from US. Who knows what this assistance gonna be, or what either Trump or Rubio or anyone else in US leadership means by helping Europeans with that. US President also said that after the conclusion of the White House talks, he called his Russian counterpart and began preparations for a meeting, the location of which will be determined between President Putin and President Zelensky. After this meeting, we will have a three-way meeting, which will include both presidents and myself, Trump added. And on my Telegram and Twitter page, by the way, I did share a post of US President that he shared on his True Social. If you are interested to read the entire poster, you can do it on my Telegram and Twitter. Also, RIA Novosti is reporting that, well, Zelensky, by the way, that was yet again did not look comfortable in White House yesterday, did not give up on their, or did not rule out, basically, at least publicly, in face of Trump, possibility of exchange of territories. So Vladimir Zelensky did not refuse to exchange territories during the talks with US President Donald Trump. In Washington, the Wall Street Journal reports, citing European officials, Zelensky did not give up on sweeping territories during his talks with Trump, but he said it would be difficult to move populations and circumvent Ukraine's constitutional prohibitions. Nevertheless, the head of Kyiv regime allowed for proportional exchange, the article states. And this is interesting. This is interesting and important, I think, because it does seems like, by the way, I don't know what is your take, but it does seems to me that US agree on Russian terms to de-escalate, to reach lasting peace, and while doing so, Washington now is basically forcing to submission globalist control regimes in Europe, and looks like quite successfully. And this statement of Zelensky that, well, this exchange of territories might happen after a few days when he refused to even discuss this topic. This is a quite indicator that my understanding of the situation is correct, and Washington is actually forcing globalist control regimes in Europe, that is UK, France, Germany, Italy, and others, first of all, is correct. Also, dear friends, during the meeting with the European so-called leaders, Trump gave opportunity to make a speech to every single one of them, and German Chancellor Merz, unlike others, once again spoke about temporary ceasefire, kind of demanded that first temporary ceasefire should be reached, although Trump, right into face of Merz and everyone else there around the table, said at least a couple of times that temporary ceasefire is not necessary. Negotiations may continue while there is battles are going on, and he says this on numerous occasions. By the way, he says this while talking to Zelensky in Oval Office. He says this during this meeting with the European so-called leaders, and once again, with the exception of Merz, no one really says much about it, which is quite a telling, and once again confirms, in my opinion, my reading of the big picture, that Washington is actually successfully, at least for now, forcing globalist puppets from European regimes to submission and to accept the terms of Russian Federation. This is Russian Federation's terms, by the way. Trump might now try to paint the picture that this is his position. That's what he was thinking always. But we all understand and we all know that Russian position on the in regards to roadmap towards a sustainable peace did not really change even a bit for since the beginning of a special military operation, let's say, right? And Russian President Vladimir Putin himself in July, that was, I believe, July 14th, 2024, himself highlighted key points in Russian vision of this roadmap towards the peace, in which, by the way, there was not a single word about some temporary ceasefires and that kind of stuff, right? Seems like Putin was successful, very successful, in Alaska during the Anchorage summit in Alaska a couple of days ago to explain in as much as possible to Trump and his team where Russia's stance are and why these Russian terms or Russian stance have to be accepted. And Washington excuse me, agreed on that, and now uses its leverage over the globalist control regimes in Europe to enforce these Russian terms on them, right? And at this point, it does not really matters what Mercer has to say about ceasefire, these temporary solutions, or anybody else from European so-called leaders. Also, dear friends, as I already mentioned on the topic of ceasefire, Trump was very clear on several occasions during that meeting, with the European leaders, and also during the face-to-face meeting with Zelensky, and also while they were talking to their press in Oval Office. I believe I have a short video on that. Let me check, and I can give you.
With the president of Russia, and I think there's a possibility that something could come out of it. And today's meeting is very important. We have, I guess, the seven very powerful leaders from Europe, and we're going to be meeting with them right after this meeting. And thank you very much for being here.
That's when he was greeting Zelensky, and well, seems like I don't have a short video when Trump was talking about talking about achieving a lasting peace instead of ceasefire. But nevertheless, let's continue with some more news. This technical stuff, by the way, sometimes gets to my nerves when you're preparing programs. This is job for several people, man. But anyways, let's continue. Macron, by the way, after the meeting and during the meeting, also with Trump and their other representatives of the collective West, stated that he is for Ukraine to maintain a strong army of hundreds of thousands of troops. And this statement of Macron I see as an attempt of globalists to kind of derail the process towards the lasting peace, because the Russian position is quite clear. Among Russian demands, one of the points are that Turkey regime should not be able to have an army, military, that will threaten in any way, shape, or form its neighbors. And I don't think Russian position in this regard has changed even a slightest, right? So all these kind of statements from Macron or Merz or anybody else from European leadership about either army or ceasefire or anything else that contradicts Russian terms is a clearly attempt of these individuals to create a ground for a potential future derailment of the peace process. And also Macron, by the way, after the meeting went to give an interview to TF1 TV channel, and during that interview he stated that Geneva can be considered as a possible location for a bilateral meeting between Putin and Zelensky. I don't think if this idea is his personally, or if this idea was discussed behind the closed doors in Washington, in the White House, but obviously Moscow cannot agree on that. Geneva is obviously a city of a hostile country to Russia, member of the anti-Russian coalition, and with the exception of maybe a few countries in this world, I don't think any other considers Switzerland to be actually neutral. And most importantly, Russia does not consider Switzerland to be a neutral state no more, right? And the Russian officials, including from Russian foreign ministry, have made statements about it quite a number of times. So I would rule out possibility of bilateral or trilateral meeting between Putin, Zelensky, and Trump either in Geneva or any other Swiss city or anywhere basically in Europe. It's not happening, I think. It's just not happening. Also, dear friends, very interesting statement. Maybe one of the most important statements during the summit was made by, surprisingly maybe for some, but by French President Stubb, who basically remembered 1944 and way that Finland get out from the war with the Soviet Union. And I remind you, dear friends, that Finland was an ally of Nazi Germany, and Finnish troops participated in war crimes and crimes against humanity during that period of engagement against Soviet Union. Finnish forces were participating in the blockade of Leningrad, by the way, as a result of which hundreds of thousands of civilians died due to starvation and hellish, absolutely hellish conditions that was in the city as a result of blockade by Nazi Germany, Finnish troops, and you might be surprised, but troops from many other European countries were also participating in this crime. Even from Spain, by the way, I believe division or two were involved in this war crime. But yet again, to go back to a statement of Starb, this is very important because in 1944, by the way, Finland get out of the war with the USSR, turned on the Nazi Germany, basically, right? And what is also important, Finland give up certain territories. Finland give up certain territories, and then for basically 8 decades, were maintaining its neutrality, at least formal neutrality, right? And just a couple of years ago, officially joined the anti-Russian coalition while becoming member of the NATO. Let me give you a statement of Stu, by the way. I definitely have this video, short clip.
Media might wonder, why is the president of Finland here? I think the reason is probably that we might come from a small country, but we have a long border with Russia, over 800 miles. And we, of course, have our own historical experience with Russia from World War II, the Winter War and the War of Continuation. And if I look at the silver lining of where we stand right now, we found a solution in 1944, and I'm sure that we'll be able to find a solution in 2025 to end Russia's war of aggression and find and get a lasting and just peace. The situation is very difficult, but that's why we're here.
Thank you, Alex, very much.
So, unfortunately, very few, if any, Western media outlets actually understood what Stubb was talking about. I was monitoring YouTube channels of Western MSM, and even though Stubb was invited on a number of channels, I did not see he was asked about what he meant by 1944 when he was talking about 1944, which is truly unfortunate because I think our Western public deserves the explanation. And yet again, dear friends, I can tell you, and I believe many other channels in alternative media will also focus on this topic. Stubb basically announced potential way for final resolution of this crisis, right? Which is that, this Western backer terrorist regime of Zelensky will give up, will agree basically on secession of certain territories and on other conditions of Russia, as Finland did in 1944, right? And while doing so, Finnish side is saying that they managed to maintain statehood, and I think that's the principle that our Finnish president was basically proposing, that Ukraine might maintain statehood while giving up certain territories. So that's exactly maybe their case, right? Not maybe, definitely. That's what is going to happen, by the way. If Kiev regime and its Western allies would agree on Russian terms right now. Otherwise, if this conflict continues, if globalists continue this proxy war against Russia, terms for the Kiev regime going to be much different and much more harsh in a couple of months' time or a year's time from now. Let's see what kind of decision will be made in this regard. And also, dear friends, when it comes to Stubb, Finnish president, there was some anecdotic situation during that meeting. Because Trump was trying to introduce Stubb and to give him an opportunity to make a speech and to understand how poorly Trump is actually prepared for these kind of meetings, by the way, and how little he knows with whom he is talking about. Let me give you this video. Stubb was sitting right up front of him, and he did not knew who that guy was, by the way. And he started looking for him, and it was a funny situation, but nevertheless highlights this poor preparation of the Western politicians in general, right? Let's watch this video.
President Stubb of Finland, and he's somebody that, where are we here? Huh? Where? Oh, you look better than I've ever seen you look. But you've done a great job, and we wanted to have you here because.
So I don't know what you will make of it, but this is not good, by the way. This is not good. A leader of any country should not allow himself to be this poorly prepared, not to know with whom he is talking about, with whom he is talking to. I mean, this is just next level of unprofessionalism, I will say. But nevertheless, as long as Trump will be helpful to resolve this bloody war that West is waging against Russia, then I'll give him credit for that. His poor preparation as a politician is first of all should be issue for U.S. citizens, I guess. Right. Let me continue with some other news now. And what is there next, by the way? What I have bookmarked also. Well, Trump stated, by the way, that prospects of resolving the Ukrainian crisis will become more clear in a week or two. And he might have a point there because obviously there have to be additional negotiations with the Russian side, between Washington and Moscow, and also we should wait and see how globalist control regimes in Europe going to behave in upcoming days and weeks. They might agree with Trump in Washington yesterday. They might agree that they're going to take Russian terms, but once they go back to their countries, these leaders of European states and organizations, they might come up with very different statements. And already, by the way, there is indicators that that's exactly what might happen, and they might activate their attempts to derail this peace process. So a couple of weeks definitely are needed. And also interesting news that during their allegedly, by the way, I was not there obviously, but allegedly, based on reports in Western media, in Russian media, during the conversation with these European leaders, so-called leaders, Trump take a pause and called the Russian President Vladimir Putin, and that conversation between the two presidents lasted for 40 minutes. And according to reports also, by the way, Trump's face-to-face meeting with Zelensky only lasted about 30 minutes. And some photos were published when Trump and Zelensky are standing right next to map of this former Soviet republic, Ukraine, and also a map of Russia with the new territories in it. And based on that picture, one might assume that Trump was on strong terms explaining to Zelensky what is going to happen and how, maybe. So it is interesting that Trump called the Russian president during their meeting with European so-called leaders, and this information was confirmed by aide of the Russian president, Yuri Ushakov, who stated basically that conversation between two presidents lasted about 40 minutes, and Trump, according to him, informed Putin about the results of the negotiations with Zelensky and the leaders of European countries in the White House. Also, a few key points from Ushakov's statement. Putin and Trump expressed the support for continuing direct negotiations between the delegations of Russia and Ukraine. The presidents discussed their idea of studying the possibility of raising the levels of representatives of Moscow and Kiev in the negotiations. That is a high-level meeting, highest possible level meeting between the Russian president and Zelensky. That's what Ushakov means, I guess. The leaders of the two countries agreed to continue the contacts on Ukraine and other issues. Putin warmly thanked Trump for his hospitality during the meeting in Alaska, and well done to Trump, by the way. I mean, I was critical of him on numerous occasions, right? And will continue to be critical when there is a reason for that. But clearly, last several days he's acting significantly differently. Seems like he is actually proactive and actually wants to achieve peace, lasting peace, and he is very much interested to kind of rebuild relationships with Russia. He and America First forces that are clearly in charge right now. It seems to me, right? They have initiative in Washington. I think they are realizing that there is nothing in it for U.S. To be engaged in this proxy war against Russia. It will be much more beneficial if Washington and Moscow will try to rebuild their relationships and cooperate in a number of directions where there is a greater potential for the two countries, right? To have a successful contacts, right? Successful cooperation. Former Russian president, dear friends, Dmitry Medvedev, reacted on yesterday's meetings that took place in Washington, in the White House. And let me give you his comment. The anti-Russian warmongering coalition of the willing failed to outplay POTUS on his turf. Europe thanked her and sucked up to Trump. The question is which tune the Kiev clown will play about guarantees and the territories back home once he's put on his green military uniform again. And I think, me and Medvedev are on the same page. It seems to me, at least for now, right? Because clearly, impression that I get from observing, monitoring yesterday's events, reading a lot of news on that, my impression is that America First forces and their former representative Trump did manage quite successfully, basically, to force to submission, basically, Zelensky and his globalist masters. Clearly, warmongering coalition of willing failed to outplay Trump and his team. Hello everyone, I hope you find informative and useful this short clip from main news update, and if so, please click that like button and leave some commentary just about anything. It might help to deal with the algorithm and reach wider audience. And if you like my work, in general and want to support to save this media project, you can assist through several ways. You can donate to this project through PayPal platform or Boosty, also with the crypto currencies, or you can subscribe to my Patreon page and page on Boosty, where I have quite a lot of extra content on regular basis. All the links are on this video in description box and in the pinned comment. And of course, many thanks to everyone who already helped and continues to support. Thank you.